How's it going, my confident bakers? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're making delicious blueberry danishes with hand laminated dough. So let's get in the kitchen and get started. This laminated dough is so versatile that I cannot keep myself from using it for more and more projects. Giant blueberry danishes filled with custard and blueberries are hard to beat when it comes to pastries. These bad boys are crispy, flaky, slightly sweetened, and full of juicy berry goodness. And you can swap the berries for other berries that you like. Gooseberries, cranberries, raspberries, even some strawberries if you cut them smaller. So let's get to it. Let me show you what we need to make these bad boys. For the dough, we'll need some white bread flour, water, yeast, salt, a little bit of butter, and then some more butter for the layers. The butter for the layers must be frozen because we'll have to grate it. For the filling, we'll need some cream cheese, sugar, vanilla paste, and an egg yolk. For the custard, we'll need some milk, sugar, cornstarch, vanilla paste, and another egg yolk. We'll need a whole egg for glazing, and we'll need some berries for baking with and for decorating. As for the equipment, we'll need a tray with some nonstick paper, a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, a brush, a whisk, a spatula, a pan for cooking the custard in. We'll need a rolling pin for rolling out the dough. We'll also need a ruler for measuring and cutting the dough. We'll need piping bags for the filling and the custard, and we'll need the grater for grating the butter. It is quite a long list of ingredients and equipment, but that's what it takes. Okay, let's make the pastry. It all starts with temperature control. My kitchen was pretty warm at the time, around 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm using water that is slightly cooler. I don't want this dough to be too warm. Pour the water in the bowl, add the yeast and the salt, and then give them a quick mix. You want to dissolve the salt and yeast. Then add the butter, and finally add the flour. Grab your dough scraper and mix it to a dough. We're aiming for a final dough temperature of around 24 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is 75 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. If your dough turns out warmer, it'll ferment more rapidly. If it's cooler, it'll take longer. So you need to adjust the fermentation times accordingly. The first part of the bulk fermentation will be done at room temperature, but after that, it'll be up to you. You can ferment this pastry in the fridge or make it on the same day. I personally prefer cold fermentation, because I can make the pastry in the evening and finish it off on the next day. It is also easier to handle that way. Okay, after a quick temperature check, cover up the dough ball, leave it to ferment for 20 minutes. It is a relatively loose dough, so we will give it 2 folds during the first fermentation stage. Once the 20-minute timer is up, dust the dough ball with flour, pop it out on the table with the smooth side down, then stretch it and fold it over itself while it's going around in a circle. Once it feels nice and tight, flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table, and that's your fold done. Place the dough ball back into the bowl, cover it up and leave it to ferment for another 20 minutes. Once the timer is up, repeat the same steps as previously. Dust it with a little bit of flour, pop it out on the table, fold it over itself, tighten it and place it back into the bowl for another 20 minutes of fermentation. So a total of 1 hour has passed, and the dough looks nice and puffy. We can now move on to creating some buttery layers. Give the dough ball a generous dusting of flour, pop it out on the table, flatten it with your hands, and then roll it out with a rolling pin to a large rectangle. Don't worry about measurements, just roll it until it's nice and thin, and try to make the edges as straight as you can. Okay, grab the first stick of butter from the freezer and grate it over 2/3 of the dough. Try to spread it out as evenly as possible. Use your dough scraper to clean up any stray pieces of butter from the table and drop them onto the dough. Now dust your hands with flour so the butter doesn't stick to them, and then press the butter into the dough. Now grab the side which doesn't have any butter on it and fold it over. Try to make it as straight as possible. If need be, you can pull it and adjust it. Next up, grab the loose piece from the other side and fold that over and adjust it so it's nice and straight. And we have now created our first layers. Now the dough needs to be wrapped up and placed in the fridge to cool down for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes of chilling, pull it out the fridge to perform the second set of folds. We will now repeat the same steps as previously. So drop the dough out on the table, dust it generously with flour and roll it out to a large rectangle. Once you rolled it out to size and made the edges nice and straight, grab the second stick of butter from the freezer and once again grate it in an even layer over 2/3 of the dough. Then grab your dough scraper, pick up any stray pieces of butter from the table, place them onto the dough. Then flour your hands, press the butter into the dough, then pick up the 1/3 of dough which doesn't have any butter on it, fold it over, make sure it's nice and straight, and then fold over the loose piece of dough from the other side. We have a few layers in our dough already, but we need to create more. So from here, roll the dough out to a large rectangle again, and fold it into 3 layers once more, but this time without any butter, and repeat it one more time. And now the dough has turned into pastry, with plenty of buttery layers inside. But before we can use it, we need to chill it down one more time. So wrap it up and pop it in the fridge for at least 1 hour. But I like to make mine in the evening and finish it on the next day. So I will leave it in the fridge for around 18 to 24 hours. Whilst the pastry is cold fermenting, we can go ahead and make the filling and the custard. The filling's pretty simple, there's not much to it. In a small bowl, combine the sugar, the egg yolk, the vanilla paste and the cream cheese. Mix it all until it's nice and smooth. Then transfer the mix to a piping bag, tie it up and leave it in the fridge for later. Now let's move on and make the custard. In a small pan, combine the sugar, the egg yolk, the cornstarch, the vanilla paste and the milk. Yes, all the ingredients are going in at the same time. There is no need for tempering. If you cook the custard carefully and you whisk it continuously, it will not be lumpy. We are not going to waste our time with complicated methods, because this recipe is complicated enough as it is. Whisk all the ingredients together, place the pan on medium to high heat and cook for around 3 minutes whilst whisking continuously. As soon as it becomes thick, it's ready. Take it off the heat straight away. Pour the custard in a bowl and cover it with some cling film so it's touching the surface. Cling film will prevent a dry skin from forming on top. Leave the custard in the fridge to cool down and set completely. Okay, it's the next day, let's shape some pastries. Unwrap the dough, give it a generous dusting of flour and roll it out to slightly more than 30 by 20 centimeters or a little bit more than 12 inches by 8 inches. Then trim the edges to that size. You can use a knife, but pizza wheel would be the best tool for the job. Cut the pastry into 6 equal squares measuring 10 by 10 centimeters or 4 by 4 inches. Now let's give the pastry its distinct shape. Take a pastry square and fold it in half diagonally. Align the edges, make sure it's nice and straight. Then take a knife and cut the pastry towards the middle point, but do not cut it all the way. Leave a little bit attached at the end there. Next you want to unfold the pastry square and brush the inside edge with a little bit of water to make it sticky. Now pick up one of the cut edges and fold it over, and then repeat the same step from the other side. And if none of that made sense, just watch and follow my hands. But there you go, that's how these things are shaped. Arrange them on a non-stick paper lined baking tray with plenty of space between them. Now cover them up, leave them for the final proof. My kitchen was quite cool, so it took me around 2 hours. You want them to be visibly puffed up before you move on to baking them. So if they are taking longer, just leave them to rise. But if you want to speed up the process, you can place them in a warmer area. Towards the very end of the final proof, you want to preheat the oven. 180 Celsius, 355 Fahrenheit, fan on. That'll be 200 Celsius or 390 Fahrenheit, fan off. These things are puffed up beautifully. Make a little indentation in the center of each pastry to make space for the filling. Now grab the piping bag with the filling, snip the end off of it and fill these bad boys up. Add around 4 blueberries to each pastry and then give the edges a good glazing with the egg. Come to think of it, I should have done the glazing before I piped in the filling and added the blueberries. That would have made the job a little bit easier. Anyway, it's all done, so let's get these bad boys in the oven. They will take around 25 to 30 minutes to fully bake, depending on your oven. I don't know about your oven, but my one tends to bake things more on one side than the other. So quite often I need to turn the tray around halfway through the bake to get a nice and evenly brown crust. These things puffed up better than I expected, you know. They turned out pretty huge, which is very good if you ask me. And they are looking about done now, so let's get them out of the oven. Of course they are perfectly fine as they are, but we are not finished yet. We need to let them cool down before the final assembly. So place them on the rack and leave them on the side. Whilst they are cooling down, we can finish off the custard. Take it from the fridge, unwrap it, and then whisk it until it's completely smooth. If for some reason you can't get it quite smooth, you can try and pass it through a sieve. Transfer the custard to a piping bag and tie it up ready for use. Okay, the custard is ready, the pastries have cooled down, it's time for final assembly. And just look at this thing, it's beautiful. It's golden brown all over, it's nice and light, and it has a nice shape. Let's fill in the center with a nice thick layer of custard. Then pop some fresh blueberries in there and give everything a good dusting with icing sugar. And now it has reached its final form. And what a magnificent thing it is. The pastry is super light and flaky. The cream cheese and baked blueberry filling is a little bit heavy and chewy, but also nice and creamy and full of baked berry goodness. And the custard is extra light and smooth, and the fresh berries are super juicy. The slightly contrasting textures and flavors work really well with each other, and the whole thing is not sweet at all. Remember, there's no sugar in this pastry. It's only in the filling and the custard, and sprinkled on top with the icing sugar. I am very happy with how these things turned out. So what do you think of these pastries? Have you ever tried making this dough before? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.